Hey guys, it's Hillary. Welcome back to my channel, Enneagram and Coaching. I'm a type 9 with an 8 wing. What is today's video about? I'm going to be teaching on childhood wounding messages. Now, you've probably heard that called a few different things. Some people like to call it just the childhood message. I know Beth McCord, she used to call it wounding childhood message, and I studied under her. I've seen lately where she's kind of taken the wounding part out. There's other people that like to refer to it as childhood patterns. All of them are okay, all of them are right. And so that's what I'm gonna be teaching you guys today. So I'm gonna teach you on all the types, pretty brief teaching on 1 through 8, and then a little bit more in depth on the 9 because I am a 9 and I have the ability to go deeper on that one. But I would recommend you don't just wait for your number or skip to your number, because I feel like it's really important to know the childhood patterns of people in your life, you know, not to use it as a weapon, but to use it as something that helps you understand them a little better and gives you more grace for them. And so I would challenge you, just listen to all the types and learn a little bit more about the people that are in your world. So where do these childhood patterns or wounding messages come from? As children, you know, we're constantly taking in information and learning and figuring out how to cope in this world, right? And so it can come from your parents, it can come from your teachers, it can come from your friends, it can come from anybody in your world, but sometimes it even comes from just your own internal dialogue. It might not even be anybody that told you this. It might never actually have been said to you, but it's how you heard things, and it's the lens you heard things through, if that makes sense, right? And so we all have a different lens we see through. Mine would be the type 9, and that wounding message that I had was it's not okay to assert yourself. And so that is a lens I actually have seen a lot of my life through. But today I want to actually teach you about that, and then also show you ways to grow through that so that we're not still, as you know, like for me, I'm a 40-year-old woman. I'm not still operating as a 10-year-old little girl. I have found ways to cope. I have found adult ways to cope now, and growing and walking through it and showing up. One thing I want to say before diving in is childhood wounds or patterns do not actually develop the personality type. It merely just describes tendencies that we observe in childhood, and then has a major impact on our life. But it's not because I'm not a 9 because of the type of childhood I had. Otherwise it would mean, you know, that maybe me and my siblings are much more similar in our personality, and that actually is not the case. And so all that to say, like, your childhood patterns did not determine your type. Hopefully that makes sense. And so that's kind of what I'm gonna go over today. The message that you heard as a child, and then also the antidote or the growth path that you can take. So, all right, let's dive in. All right, so type 1, theirs was, it's not okay to make mistakes or be wrong. And so they grew up thinking they want to be the good boy or the good girl, and they tried really hard to be the good kid. For them, maybe just simply being a child wasn't good enough. They say ones tended to develop a sense of seriousness at an early age. They tried to never be wrong or even be caught being wrong. To them, that's the lens they were seeing life through, where if anybody maybe tried to correct them or they did something wrong, it just felt so much worse than it would for a different type of personality. And so for them, as adults, if they're continually, you know, living this way, they're trying to fix everybody in their world and then also control everybody in their world so that no mistakes are made. And you could see where that would not work as an adult anymore. And so the growth path for a 1 is acceptance. And so starting to allow those mistakes and allow, and of course, none of us want to make a mistake, but when that does happen, because that's inevitable, finding peace within themselves, being okay with it. And a big thing is not only allowing the mistake in themselves, but then other people too, and not expecting that level of perfection, and not being so let down when it doesn't look as perfect as they wanted it to, or a mistake was made. So again, taking some of those coping mechanisms as a child and growing through them and not utilizing them as much anymore as an adult, but just being more aware. That is the area of growth for a type 1. Okay, so moving on, the type 2, their childhood pattern, childhood wounding message was, it's not okay to have your own needs. And I think it's probably because maybe in whatever situation it was, they were praised when they put other needs before their own, which is not bad in itself. The bad part is when they start to think it's selfish to have any needs at all. And so that's where they learn that you must give in order to get. And so for them, a lot of times they were trying to receive love, and so they thought you had to give to receive love. And you can see where that could help a child cope, but as an adult, it no longer works for them. They probably thought that maybe good people don't have needs, or it's just selfish, or whatever that looks like for them. I know sometimes we praise those people that are like, oh, they do everything and they ask for nothing. But in the end, is that healthy? I believe, especially as a coach, like self-care is an important part of living the life to your fullest. As adults, twos need to learn that it's okay for them to take care of themselves too. They're still giving, they're still loving, all of that. Those are such good gifts, but they have to learn to take care of themselves. When you start to nurture yourself and look after yourself, you become free to give with open hands and not expectations of receiving. And there's just more freedom in that. And so that's kind of one of the growth paths for a two. Final one that I feel like is an important one for a two is learning the ability to say no. And to let your no's be no and not have to give a paragraph on why it's a no. Just allow that it's okay sometimes to say no, and that does honor you in the process. Moving on to the type 3, their childhood pattern or childhood wounding message is it's not okay to have your own needs and identity and kind of like you are what you do. For them, they're trying to be successful in order to earn love. So a type 3 might have felt like they're not very valuable as just themselves. They get their validation and worth from their achievements and successes. And you can see where as a child, they're like, oh, I got a good grade, that's a great thing. And it's like, we want our kids to get good grades and we want that kind of stuff to happen, or the teacher was like, good job, but somewhere in there in their little teeny childhood lens, they started to see the world as like, oh, my successes and achievements make me a good person and make me lovable. Again, it's the lens that they were born with. It's not necessarily, like my son is not a type 3 because of the way I raised him. God gave him that temperament and that personality, and this is the lens he sees the world through. And for 3s, failure is painful. And so a lot of times you'll see them not even try. If it's something they don't think they can fully succeed at, they might not even try at all. They have the tendency to put on a mask and be what people need and set aside their real self. And that, again, will not serve them well into their adulthood. And the growth path for a 3 is they need to learn that they are lovable just for existing, just for being here. God put them on this earth and they are lovable for just who they are. And it's okay to let the mask down and to show others their true self without having to perform and achieve and have great success. And so that's one thing I took from learning about the 3 from my son is while I still congratulate him and I'm excited for him, I, for the most part, try and tell him I love you either way. Right? And so God loves us all either way. But that's an important message. We need to get that as the thing that's playing in their head, right? We all have this record player in our head. And for the 3, I think it's important for them to know they're loved even if they don't succeed always, and that their achievements don't make them more lovable. That's that growth path for the 3. Okay, so moving on to the type 4, their childhood message or childhood pattern was it's not okay to be too functional or too happy. And I think for them, and this one actually can confuse me sometimes because it's like, okay, what does that really mean? But for a 4, I think what I've observed and studied is a lot of times a 4 felt like they were too much. They were just too much. And so it's not okay to be too much. It's not okay to be too happy. It's not okay to be too sad. It's not okay to be too anything. And so that's that message they were hearing. And they a lot of times feel like they were different than maybe their parents or even their peers or anyone in their life. They started to notice I think I'm different from you. And so for them, they thought there must be something wrong with me. And that was the measurement they used. If I'm not like you or I'm too much, therefore I'm not normal, there must be something wrong, which is obviously a lie. But that is what their little minds were hearing and developing and figuring out in order to cope through these feelings of hurt and pain and sadness. And so a lot of times they just feel very misunderstood. The growth for the 4 is when they start to realize nothing's actually wrong with them. They're not missing something. They are just as good as everyone else. They start to discover who they are in Christ, that they are good and that they are enough and that they're not too much. That's when they begin to grow and leave that wounding message behind. They literally develop a genuine sense of identity and self-worth. And I've seen it and it's beautiful. That's the growth path for the 4. All right, so moving on. The type 5, it's not okay to be too comfortable in the world. I have a type 5 for a son. He's 16. And so I tend to understand the 5s a little more. I'm really, really, really grateful for the Enneagram. And while, he's 16, so I'm not able to use it a ton, it has given me some more insight to him and how he works, and that has been great. It's not okay to be too comfortable in the world, and this usually is because they felt maybe overwhelmed by their family or their school or their friendships, or something in them was like, this is too much, this feels overwhelming. And I just think like the type 5 more than likely felt foolish or caught off guard as a child, and this caused them to develop a way of coping by thinking like, okay, I can't get comfortable. I have to constantly be learning, constantly be in the know, and putting stuff in their mind. And so and this really caused a sense of insecurity in the type 5. And they've learned to cope with this in childhood by learning to go into their own mind. That ends up being their safe haven, their own mind, and they feel the safest. And so a lot of times you'll see them want alone time more. I've said this in other videos, but some people's battery starts off this full every day. Say the battery is that big and it does start off this full, and the 5s, they have that size battery, but theirs is only able to go up halfway full, and that's where they start every day, so it gets depleted faster. They end up having this false belief that they will be safe if they are well informed and educated and know everything that's going on. And you can see where as an adult, that's not gonna, help them totally, because now they constantly are trying to learn more and learn more and learn more, and then they don't feel like they're ever enough. And so the growth for a type 5, when they no longer feel depleted, they will experience a new freedom to give away what they have. So that knowledge, they'll start to give it away, and they'll experience freedom in that. Their desire for alone time will change from survival to a desire to connect with their own heart and God's presence and the people around them. And you can see where as a 5 that could cause more freedom and a way to, be comfortable and feel accepted and not always feel like they don't have all the answers, so they gotta go get more. All right, so let's move on to the type 6. The type 6 is, it's not okay to trust yourself or to depend on yourself. And that is kind of the constant message in their head. And I think maybe as a child, they became aware that the world is a scary place where bad things happen. And there was instances where they, just realized that they couldn't trust themselves. 6s could be overly concerned with safety and security. They have very little confidence in their own abilities to handle difficult things. I know that for 6s, it could be easier to let others be responsible for the outcomes, and so they'll go to somebody else for advice, and a lot of times that way they're not responsible for the consequences if it is a bad decision or bad move. And so I think as children, they started to develop these coping mechanisms. They decided that they couldn't make decisions and they couldn't trust their own instincts. And so, but you can see how as an adult, that doesn't work anymore. And the growth path for a type 6 is as they learn to rely less on others and learn to trust themselves more, freedom comes with that. They'll take more action and they'll learn to trust themselves, and knowing that they can make their own decisions, and that it's okay, if it does go wrong, that their strength actually comes from God, and that they do have inner resources to push through fears and live courageously. They really do. It's in there. And so if they can find that place and go to God and learn to depend on themselves and trust themselves, then definitely be more growth and freedom there. And it's just having that self-awareness. That's the key here, is realizing, when you're in that moment and you're like, okay, I gotta ask so-and-so for their opinion, you can actually have a little self-awareness of like, wait, is this one of those moments where I'm just not trusting myself? Kind of go from there versus be super unaware of that and never even realize that you don't trust yourself. All right, so moving on to the type 7, their wounding childhood message was, it's not okay to depend on anyone for anything. So a lot of these kind of sound similar, but this one's different. It's not okay to depend on anyone for anything. So they actually depend on themselves more instead of anyone else, which is opposite of the 6, right? And so they actually, as children, can unconsciously decide to nurture themselves versus go to others for nurture. And sometime in their life, they decided, that happiness and satisfaction is up to them, and that they can't go to others for that. They actually have amazing imaginations, and they can actually create a world that is full of happy thoughts and exciting adventure, and just want only that from life. I think with 7s, I've heard, that maybe something happened. Again, who knows if it was just their own, what they decided in their own mind or someone in their life, but it was decided something happened to cause them to feel emotionally neglected and cut off. And so that's when they decided, okay, well, that hurts so much. And so my coping mechanism is it's not okay to depend on anyone else. So for anything. And so that's where that comes from. And some of the growth paths for a 7 is learning to stay in the hard things and stay in the sad feelings sometimes, not to live there, but not to escape and reframe as fast as they can, but it's to stay and to process and then to move on. And then also to learn to depend on God, and that to rely on, it's okay to rely on God's strength, you know, that'll give them strength, and that, and learning to embrace all of life, sometimes the unpleasant with the enjoyable, but also learning that they can trust others. That's super important, that people are going to let us down, and being okay, and but still not to withhold all that trust and not think you can depend on anyone else. It's kind of like unlearning that what you learned as a child of like, I can't depend on anyone, but going, okay, I can depend on my friendships to be there for me and show up for me. And ultimately know that, yeah, they are gonna let me down sometimes, and I'm gonna have to process things and stay in those feelings. But ultimately, we could trust God and we can depend on God, and then He'll give us that strength in those times, you know, that we need it. So that is for the 7. Okay, so the 8 wounding childhood message was it's not okay to be vulnerable or trust anyone. So theirs actually comes from a different place, where the 8 felt like they had to grow up really fast, and they get this idea in their head that it's not safe to be gentle or giving. And so I know I've read that some 8s felt rejected or betrayed as children, and so then they developed that exterior, right? That hard exterior where it's like, no one's gonna get through this. I'm never gonna be vulnerable again, and so that I can't get hurt. Again, it's just a survival coping mechanism that we develop as kids that does not serve us well as adults. And so a little bit of that, right? We gotta be careful, but for the most part, that would lead to a very isolated, alone life. And so the growth path for the 8 is by sharing their heart with others. It's maybe not as scary as they thought it would be as an adult. And they really will find their strength in being vulnerable and have a greater capacity to care for others. And especially when others are struggling, they will, you know, have just a greater capacity to help them. And another piece of the growth path is, you know, turning to God. They will start to feel the healing embrace of God and kind of go back to that innocence and grace that is there. And so those are the growth paths for the 8. All right, so the last one, the type 9, which I'm a type 9, and so I'll be able to speak on this versus teach on this a little bit. So I mean, in all reality, I'll do both. The wounding childhood message of a type 9 is it's not okay to assert yourself. And I have to say, when I first read this, like 10 years ago, I cried because it hit home, and it hit a place that I didn't even know existed. And I was like, ah. I do feel that way. I do operate with that wounding message of it's not okay to assert yourself. And I mean, I've read that a lot of 9s do report to have had this happy home life, but for me, it wasn't the case. And that's part of what I wanted to share on mine, because I always want to be really real and authentic with you guys on what I went through. And again, this isn't, what I went through didn't turn me into a 9, right? I'm not a peacemaker because I grew up in a very abusive, chaotic childhood. That didn't turn me into this peacemaker, but that is the lens I see the world through. And so I decided that it was easier for me to step away and to not assert myself and to become invisible and not give, you know, my true opinions or what I'm really feeling. And unfortunately, for me and a lot of 9s, this leads to not knowing your feelings at all. I know when I coach other 9s, it's really, really, really tough for them to go, what am I feeling? It takes us a long time to actually unearth some of that because they've quieted that voice for, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 years or more. And so that's some of that work that we have to do for the growth with the type 9. I learned as a child to downplay my emotions, and so that I wouldn't cause conflict, people wouldn't be mad at me. I decided that I would just, you know, merge and be whatever you wanted me to be and not assert myself ever. And that, I want to say, has not served me well as an adult. Because I feel like as a child, when I did assert myself, I created more problems for myself, and I got in trouble, or I, you know, was told my opinion didn't matter, or why am I talking? And so I really learned to just withdraw and draw into myself. And and my teen years were just surrounded by lots of conflict. And so I learned like, oh, if I don't assert myself, then no conflict will happen. But again, as an adult, as a 40-year-old, how does that really work out for me now, right? And now the growth path for the 9, and myself included, was learning to pay attention to myself and to realize that my needs mattered and that they were valuable. And so even if it was gonna cause conflict, I learned to still step in it and be in it, realizing I didn't have to use the same coping skills I learned as a child now as an adult. And so I will say every time I have to assert myself, I get a little like, ugh, because it's hard. And I don't know if it does go away. It's always there, but the growth is that I'm aware of it. And I will, walk through those emotions and go, okay, why are you feeling this way, Hillary? Why do you feel like you can't assert yourself? Why do you feel like your opinion doesn't matter? And because of this, I've learned to hear my own voice and give attention to my own voice and to my own feeling. And I feel like I've developed into a more whole person and with more freedom. I've learned that my voice is important. And I do give myself attention. I've learned, with the Enneagram, with Christ and different things, that my needs are important and I am just as valuable as everyone else. And that gives me such a freedom to be me. And whatever that looks like, and I'm not always right. And when I do assert myself, it's not always right. Just the fact that I have learned like my needs matter and that people do want me there and it's okay to assert myself. It's the greatest freedom I've had. I guess in the end, for a 9, the important thing is to learn to show up. And even if it might create some conflict, that by not showing up and not creating conflict, that doesn't actually give you real peace. It's really a false sense of peace if you're always invisible and you never say anything and you're always like, no, it's okay. Just, I'm not important. Just to keep your world peaceful. It's not true peace. And that is what I've learned. I've learned that sometimes you have to walk into conflict and stay in conflict. My stomach hurts. I'm sick about it. I can't sleep. When this does happen, I'm just being real with you. It's not easy. But when doing this, I actually find true peace. And that's what we're ultimately looking for as type 9s. And so all that to say, that is the growth for the 9. And in the end, the growth here on all types is really walking hand in hand with God, searching, seeking, reading his word, listening, and when this awareness is brought to you, like to learn to show up and learn to use new coping mechanisms, right? My new coping mechanism is going, what do I need? What do I want? How does this serve God? How does this give myself a voice, because that's super important. I think as each type grows in self-awareness, that's where the freedom's gonna come from, in all types, in all areas. And so that's ultimately our goal. It's just more freedom to be ourselves and to accept ourselves and to love ourselves. So that was my purpose in teaching this today. I hope that you can see some of a pattern in yourself. You were able to recognize and gain wisdom and knowledge through this teaching. Ultimately, stop using the coping mechanisms from childhood as an adult, right? And some of those are lies. That's a lie. It's a lie that it's not okay to assert myself. That is a lie. Why am I still believing that? It's okay to assert myself. A type 1, it's okay to make mistakes sometimes, right? And so we're human, we're all human. And so ultimately the goal is to accept ourselves, accept our flaws, go to God with those, ask for forgiveness, and gain freedom and grace for others. And okay, so really that's all I have today. I hope you learned a little bit more about yourself. And so that's all I got. This is probably way too long anyways. If you made it to this point, yay, congrats. If you want more info about the Enneagram, I have a website, I'll put it right here. It's enneagramandcoaching.com. I also have an Instagram right here. What is it? Hillary_McCaskey_coaching. I also have another Instagram, which is Enneagram and Coaching. Just Enneagram and Coaching. And that's where I just post about the Enneagram. And so, let's see, is that it? Is that all I got? I think those are the 3 main things. Please subscribe. It keeps me going. It keeps me going, okay, they want more. I'm gonna teach more. And don't forget to give this a thumbs up. I really appreciate it, guys. And until next time, bye.